Welcome to Blockchain Recorded, the podcast for the tech curious, where we talk about anything and everything related to the exponentially evolving crypto, blockchain, and Web 3.0 space. Our mission is simple: to share knowledge, facilitate discourse, and help evolve education in blockchain fundamentals, decentralization solutions, and relevant use cases for today's digital economy. We at Blockchain Recorded are not registered investment advisors and do not deal with financial or trading token elements, nor offer any licensed financial services. The content of this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only, while the opinions of all parties involved are their own. I'm your host, Nina Tserar, and now let's talk blockchain. So before I introduce our guest today, I'd like to remind everyone to follow us on X, former Twitter, at Recorded Podcast, where we pre-stream each episode on Spaces the day before publishing to all major podcast platforms. For the full platform list, visit our website, blockchainrecorded.com. Our guest today is Klay Nichol, the COO and co-founder of Stability Protocol. Klay is a global finance professional with a 15-year journey through JP Morgan, Credit Suisse, and AGF, with an entrance to the blockchain space in 2016. In 2021, he was hired by Mike Novagratz at Galaxy Digital to lead the West Coast and the U.S. to onboard banks and institutions into digital assets. In 2023, Klay co-founded Stability Protocol, which is the world's first feeless and tokenless public blockchain network with the goal of removing the key barriers that are preventing global adoption of blockchain technology. Excited to talk about Stability today. And outside of blockchain, Klay is a two-time figure skating gold medalist, have to mention that, and proud dad of 3. So without further ado, Klay, welcome to Blockchain Recorded.
Thanks for having me, Nina.
You have quite an eclectic background. I'm going to nitpick a little bit for the traditional finance part. Were you in investment banking or research or trading, or all 3?
Actually, yeah, the latter, all 3. So I started off as a gold analyst, or actually started on the buy side at AGF, then switched to being a gold analyst at Credit Suisse. So I traveled the world going to different gold mines and that type of thing, writing the research reports. Then went to Credit Suisse in London, and then JP Morgan, I was in banking. So I always joke that I've kind of made the full circle from analog gold to digital gold, if you're a fan of Bitcoin.
Absolutely. I'm sure everybody asks you this. You come from traditional finance, so TradFi. I just want to just start with a common question of what brought you to blockchain tech from the TradFi world in 2016.
Yeah. Being on the West Coast, you have a lot of tech entrepreneurs, which I covered in banking, and got introduced in 2016 to Bitcoin and blockchain. And that's actually when I also met my co-founder, who was building. I actually met him a little bit later in 2018. He had just made a switch, and I was fascinated by the space. Jamie Dimon, think he's an amazing leader, but at that moment he was not a big fan of crypto, as everyone recalls. So you had to kind of stay under a rock and not talk too much about it. So I quietly studied for years. And it was, in 2021 where I decided, okay, I think this is a moment where we've talked about institutional adoption for a long time, and I thought this is the moment. And I have the skill set and the background to hopefully help bring institutions into the space. And if successful, maybe this amazing technology that we're all here and excited about, this blockchain technology, we could get product market fit. And I thought bringing these big institutions in, I could do that. And that's when I left JP Morgan to join Mike at Galaxy Digital.
Yeah, I'm curious about that. How did your path lead to Mike? And how did it go once you were there?
So it was, I reached out to a few firms. This is before there was a large exodus from traditional finance into the crypto space during this period. And I reached out, and all 3 of them got back. I sent like 3 or 4 LinkedIn messages. And everyone was like primed to have a conversation. I know that sounds odd, right? Like rifle shots. And
so LinkedIn, interesting.
Yeah, I there wasn't that many that I was going to work for. And that had this focus on being a bridge to institutional adoption. Like, if we need institutions in the space if we're going to get user growth.
Right.
And so reached out and interviewed with Mike, interviewed with the senior leadership, and just connected on what we were trying to build. And very quickly it was, okay, Klay, you're covering the banks, like you're coming from the banking space. We're trying to onboard these crypto investment products to these bank platforms, like go, right? And we were successful. We successfully onboarded to Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, PNC, some of these very large platforms, as well as some banks internationally. But that was a watershed moment. Quiet, because banks were being quiet about it. But where I quickly kind of got disenfranchised is I realized we weren't closer to product market fit, and that as much as these digital asset teams want access to blockchain, they can't touch public blockchain much, right? There's very few instances that they can. And that was frustrating. You have this amazing tech and they want it, but they can't touch it. And there's these barriers. And then that's when I really kind of said, okay, I need to find out my path here, why I'm here. I don't see it happening. And so I need to figure out how I'm going to continue to advance institutional adoption. Which
ultimately led you to co-founding Stability.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's where Julian and I were catching up, and Mike, there's three of us as co-founders, and we've known each other now for 5 years at that point. And Mike and Julian have been very successful in the traditional Web3 space with several projects and building infrastructure. And they've always wanted to advance the industry as well. And they felt that it was a circular reference as well. So we were talking about that and realizing that we have two technologies here. We have cryptocurrency as a technology and blockchain technology. Right. Blockchain's ready today. Cryptocurrency is going to be ready in the future, in our opinion. And what are these key barriers that are preventing? And we really honed in on those barriers. And then that led us to the design of Stability of where it is today.
Yeah, it's fascinating to hear, as I'm sure that you've heard, maybe from some your other feedbacks. But I've talked to a lot of founders and working on L1s and L2s and trying to tackle scalability and trying to tackle the fee problem. And this is a complete twist in how the business model can be. So fascinated with Stability's mission in helping to facilitate the removal of these key barriers. And I want to get into what exactly do you consider all these barriers to be that are preventing the global adoption of blockchain tech? Because I think this is the last, for example, like you just mentioned, you started it a couple of years ago. Why would you say in the last 5 years that blockchain has not been able to catch up? And yeah, exactly what I asked. What are these key barriers to tackle?
So there's two different types of blockchains out there. Public blockchains, which is what we're all familiar with, and then private blockchains, which we're less familiar with.
Right.
Pre-public blockchains, private blockchains, everyone thought was the answer. And the last 10, 12 years, that has been the focus of enterprises. And it is now becoming more common knowledge that doesn't work. Private consortium blockchains don't work. We saw Maersk and IBM shutter their project. We won't go into all the reasons that doesn't work, but it's not working. So there's been a transition. Okay, public blockchains, and we've seen big accounting firms and advisory firms saying like, yes, that's the way that we're going to go in the future. But we haven't really seen significant adoption. So those are the two paths. So really focusing on public blockchain and why public blockchain hasn't seen enterprise adoption, there's 4 key factors, I think. And I don't think they're going to be surprising to anyone or any of your listeners. Regulatory risk, user experience, cost, and scale. These are the 4...
The usual suspects.
Yeah, exactly. But the slight twist is that it's our perspective that the root cause of all 4 of those is cryptocurrency.
Right.
And once that dependency is removed from the equation, you end up having a significant amount of white space that opens up. And that's what we feel, why we believe that we can now really move forward to gain enterprise adoption. We're starting to see that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's talk stability. So I think you've answered why stability. So how is stability different from what is already out there? I mean, I already know the answer, but of course, if you can talk to it's as it being the feeless and tokenless public blockchain network, right? We're so used to the native token model, reading the white paper, going through the tokenomics and hearing about, like I said earlier, tackling transaction costs. And although the feeless concept for the user has been catching on, the tokenless this is the first time that I'm actually, speaking to you about it. Mm-hmm. It would be great if you could just help us understand your thesis behind having a tokenless concept. And also, second part of the question, how does one go about building it? If you can talk about the tech as much as you can.
Yeah. So I'll start off by saying I'm not the technical co-founder. We went through my background.
It's fine.
And so, but I will, I think that's actually helpful in keeping it somewhat higher level in the bigger concepts, right? Mm-hmm. So stability, obviously we've heard of feeless and account abstraction, sponsored transactions. These we believe are Band-Aid solutions in a sense to give us more runway and to try to streamline the user experience, right? And abstract away the gas fee. Mm-hmm. But someone has to pay a gas fee. I think it might be helpful to start with how public blockchains today, let's use Ethereum as the base case, because that's the global compute, what people used to call global compute. I would challenge that assumption now.
Sure.
But how it's designed. And so Ethereum is designed in a way that block space is designed to stay congested and to keep block space scarce, because that increases the amount of gas burnt with transactions, which makes it a deflationary token economy, which then increases the token price, which everyone loves, also increases the security of the network. So that system is designed expressly to drive value to that cryptocurrency. And most public blockchains are designed in that function, right? You can't be optimized for a cryptocurrency and be optimized for use and utility at the same time. So Ethereum does 90 gigabytes of data in a year. It's a very, very, very small amount of data that it processes. And so that's the current setup. With stability, we've removed the token. We do not incentivize validators with the token and incentivizing them to run the transactions, right? And so the way that we run our business is our business model is a software as a service business, as well as a customer service business, helping enterprises gain access to public blockchain technology. So I just want to say one thing, is that on the user experience, anyone can use stability. That is a public experience. On the validator side, they are permissioned validators. And so some people in Web3 right there will be not interested, right? And that's okay. What we're focused on, our mission is to get enterprises, traditional businesses into blockchain so that your parents and my parents and grandparents can all see the benefits of blockchain. And so that's high level. But I don't know if I answered your question specifically though. So maybe we can refine it a little bit. Yeah,
sure. It's absolutely fair because, like you said, we want our parents who knows? But in terms of everybody needs to be onboarded and have an easier user experience. That's obvious. My challenge and understanding is, incentivizing. How do you then, just backtrack when you said in terms of the validators, how do you incentivize the validators if you don't have a token? What's your model behind that? Or if you can talk to that.
Yeah, there's two. If you are an enterprise and you want, say you're PayPal, you want to run your payments application on chain, you want to maintain a big part of enterprise blockchain adoption. Another challenge we haven't really talked about is privacy, right? So you want to maintain privacy of your customer data. And so they have now a solution where they can do that with stability. They can run their own, what we call internally a private mempool, where they can get their users with their user identifiers to be able to gain access and submit transactions to their mempool. And then we run on a PayPal validator. That's going to sound like a somewhat of a private chain within a public context, right?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
But so this is just one of the options. So PayPal will pay for that validator slot. Why would they pay for that validator slot? Is because they're getting tremendous utility of being able to do that. One thing, and I don't want to diverge too much, but one thing that we really view ourselves as at Stability is what we call a public distributed compute network, right? And when you think of the context of Ethereum being global compute, which I don't necessarily believe it is, given what we've talked about in its structure, you can now design applications that are much cheaper from a network cost and much more secure than traditional Web 2 cloud infrastructure. Meaning we can build a PayPal application, which we've done, like a Venmo. We've built this. It's a live demo that has no back end. There is no server. So that when you look at PayPal, they've spent $2 billion on hardware.
Okay.
They've spent, 10 plus billion a year on network infrastructure, cloud compute, security, all of those things. And you have a similar experience that we can build on Stability that doesn't require any of that. And so therefore you have this new design of being able to build Web3 applications that have Web 2 user experiences.
That's a mouthful. And just to backtrack a little bit, you mentioned PDC, right? And maybe would help also, I think, because we're jumping around a little bit, but in terms of what Stability is, and what you also mentioned the compute, right? And the compute factor. Maybe if you could explain, I'm not familiar as much with PDC, and also why are you actually choosing that, and think it's maybe what is the next evolution of cloud, or if you say computing?
Yeah. So you haven't heard that term because we had to make it, right? And so the evolution that happens there is you had previously, in the 1980s, you went from on-prem hardware, meaning you had an office that had a stack of servers in the office. From 2000s onward, everything started transitioning to the cloud and still is.
Right.
Why did that transition happen? That transition happened because cloud is cheaper, more secure, more flexible. There's a long list of reasons why that transition happened. Why would public distributed compute happen in the future is the same reasons. Much cheaper, much more secure, still flexible. And so that's why we see and why we see this transition happening over time. Now, there hasn't been a public distributed compute network until now because there hasn't been a tokenless, feeless public blockchain that can scale and offer that. So that's why when I explained, this is kind of bringing back the PayPal example, you can now build a application that is much cheaper to run and much more secure. Enterprises today, this last thing I'll point is enterprises today don't understand, for the most part, the benefits of interoperability or composability, but that is another benefit that's just waiting there for enterprises when they finally realize the power of blockchain in the future. But that's not going to create adoption. Enterprises and the boards that make those decisions look at first order problems, and that is cost and security are probably the two biggest.
Just curious, what has been the feedback thus far on your protocol and how you came about building stability in this way, like from within the space, not maybe necessarily enterprise, or maybe if that's most of the people that you deal with. Just curious.
So I'll take it in two camps. You have the Web3 community, which we are steeped in and from. That's where we came from, with a mission for blockchain, not just cryptocurrency, right? I would put that kind of bent on it. And that community and the investors and venture capitalists and other co-founders, they love the idea. The question that it's so orthogonal, like you started out in the conversational, to everything else that has been seen, it's like, well, what about consensus? What about double spend problem? What about 51% attack? Right. And so we can dive into that, because I think bedrock kind of hits in consensus, which so maybe we can jump back to that in a minute. But
absolutely,
that is what challenges them. And so they're like, and before this, it wasn't built. This blockchain went live in public beta net in November, right? It took us over a year of just building to get it to this point. And now when we're out speaking with enterprises, the different community of people who are going to use it, the feedback is like incredible. Like we are gaining so much momentum, so much faster than we anticipated, because there's no regulatory risk. The user experience is familiar. The costs are known. We don't have a gas fee or whatever, and there's not like a token that they're tying their business to, and then it can scale to Web 2 size. So those things make the conversation very open, and it's just like, let's just get to work. Like, great.
So in terms of regulatory, much easier, obviously, because you're extracting the token component of and potential speculation factors.
For sure.
Which we
That's
all
a
know.
big one.
It's huge. It's huge.
That's a big one. But the other three are not insignificant. The user experience, like the world, your parents and my parents aren't going to use MetaMask.
No.
Hexadecimals and all, like that's just not going to happen.
No.
So we have to offer a Web 2 experience as well.
Right. Well, you did allude to the consensus part of it, so we might as well just jump to that part. So which consensus model do you use?
Yeah.
If you don't have, proof of work, proof of stake, that completely falls out off the radar.
Yeah, I kind of also just want to speak to proof of work and proof of stake in the context of consensus mechanisms as a body of academia. Consensus mechanisms in this world, this whole space of academia goes back like hundreds, if not thousands of years, right? It's just huge. It's bigger than the entire space of blockchain over and over and over again. And so what we often in our little ecosystem of Web3, we look at proof of work and proof of stake as like the gold standard. But when you put it in the context of the broader space, it's quite fringe, right? So I just want to kind of start there. So back to stability and where we are from a consensus mechanism and where we landed is you now have the token removed, right? And when you remove that token, we're able to create a blockchain that is deterministic. Now, what does that mean? Deterministic means that it is mathematically provable from state change to state change. Okay? How does the world work today? What does it work like on Ethereum? Ethereum has a minting and a burn function, right? Every transaction. That is not an on-chain transaction. That is an off-chain transaction, which requires consensus to confirm. So when you take out that token, you now, as I mentioned, you don't have that challenge. So we're able to now leverage consensus mechanisms similar to what on JP Morgan Onyx, these large data centers use, similar to like Raft, RAFT, Paxos, not the stablecoin, but more the consensus mechanism, that are highly efficient, highly rugged and provable, and they're crash fault tolerant is what they're called. And you don't have a scenario where you have to worry about a 51% attack, with a deterministic blockchain, every transaction on Stability is a signed transaction that is a cryptographic proof, which is quantum secure in and of itself. And so if you and I sign a transaction, it is validated, it is on the blockchain. So you can't override that type of a system similar to a proof of work or proof of stake. And we know the vectors, everyone's quite familiar with the vectors of how you would supersede those types of consensus mechanisms. Stability cannot have an invalid state. It's as clear as 2 + 2 = 4. And if someone tries to submit 2 + 2 = 5, the transaction will fail. It's not valid. And so as long as you have one validator that is running, you will have a blockchain that is moving forward and with a valid state. And when that last validator goes down, if it were to, we're talking like the worst case scenarios. You got to go to that tail scenario, right? Mm-hmm. The blockchain stops at a valid state. Mm-hmm. What would you prefer? That's a question we have to ask ourselves, which you probably haven't asked yourself before. Would you rather the blockchain stop at a valid state, or would you like it that it forks off into its own thing and goes down another path? And we understand the vectors of proof of work, proof of stake. So I think with enterprises, they just want the valid state at the end of the day.
Right. We keep mentioning the validators. So who runs the validators with Stability? Or who can run validator nodes?
Yep. So you have to be accepted into that. We would have to approve, right? So this is more of a proof of authority model, right? Again, that's going to be like the antithesis of traditional like Web3 community. But again, the goal is blockchain, right? In the hands of everyone. And this is a big conversation. Understand that, again, I would just say, understand that we're coming from Web3 and we want the vision over time. So the people who can run the validators we're at this point, we're going to be starting with a group of 10 validators at mainnet, and we're going to continue to expand that over time. Right? And we are going to decentralize over time. Okay. Validators also can be companies that want to run a validator for their own use, like we described with a PayPal example. They can also run transactions for public. We will be running at a starting point. We will be running validators. We have conversations with Google to be running one of the initial validators, and they would be running that as a public good, right? So our blockchain will be free to use for individual public use up to a certain point, right? Mm-hmm. That means permissionless access to blockchain, right? Up to a certain point of use. Enterprises will be able to use up to a certain point, and then when you start getting into large amounts of transaction volumes, that's when you start having to pay a license, right? Pay a license fee, just like any other software. Okay.
I have a little bone to pick with you.
Please.
In terms of Google being a potential partner, or like you said, a validator. So obviously prominent big tech player, cloud computing services, totally makes sense, right? For Stability's business model. You probably have an idea of where I'm going with this, but it does carry a negative connotation to its name. Well, within the Web3 community, it goes against its ethos, as it's sort of the antithesis to the notion of privacy and self-sovereignty, given the data mining problem, and some would argue even more extremely invasion of privacy. Is there any backlash because of Google, or no?
Again, you have to ask, who is our customer? And what is our goal, right? And so our customer, but we can have a philosophical conversation of where it goes, and so we can dive into that.
Sure.
But we're wanting to onboard some of the biggest multinationals in the world, right?
Yeah, totally get that.
And they're wanting to use it for supply chain or payments and things that are going to change your and my life every day, right? The question,
like actual practical use cases, yeah.
which we've been all striving for, whether it's public or private blockchain, right? When we haven't been able to do either, right?
Right.
And so,
fair enough,
right? And so what I think you're talking about is privacy, though, at the end of the day. And we believe in privacy as well. And there's a element here that there's ways to maintain privacy and own your data in Web3. There's ways to do that. And the information that's being validated doesn't necessarily have all of the transaction objects included, the to, the from, the amount, like at a traditional blockchain. There's ways that you can encrypt that and abstract that away. So our first and primary goal is when you have large institutions that are validating transactions, think of this philosophically, and these are new concepts. I think they're fun to talk through, and I don't think a lot of people think of this.
No, absolutely. And this is why we're doing this conversation, because I think it does need to be discussed. And yeah, absolutely. I think it puts things in perspective.
So let's think about the security of Ethereum, right? What's the total security amount staked on Ethereum today? I think it's, is it like, what is the number? I wish I knew that number, but
I actually don't know the most recent one, but yeah.
I don't know either. I used to have this number exactly, so forgive me, audience. I'm going to throw a number out there, but let's say it's like between $50 and $100 billion,
give or take.
Right? I'd be like somewhere in there. I should know that number, so apologies I don't.
That's okay.
And that is to secure the network that you will slash if there's a nefarious actor, right? That keeps everyone honest. That's the whole concept. If you have these large multinationals, what do they have that's worth more than $50 to $100 billion? Their brand. And so for Google to do a nefarious transaction, which they can't necessarily even do on Stability, given they could do reordering, which happens like MEV, right? Happens everywhere. MEV happens on all these other chains as well. That potentially, I don't want to we're getting kind of down a rabbit hole in a sense, but the point though is that Google is not going to, on one transaction, try to manipulate or change like in a proof of stake aspect if their brand is on the line. And so you have pretty secure reason to believe that they're going to run this in a thoughtful way. Now, I'm sure there's people all over that are going to jump on that and want to kill that. But what I would ask the audience to really think about, it's a new concept. I would say think about that, of what incentive what that company would actually do, right? And how that would work. And I think that there's strong evidence that you have way more security having 10 multinationals that have their brands at stake. The question is, will they validate given like that risk and all that? There's a whole bunch of stuff to go on that we can dive in there. But the point, and I'll just leave it there, is that there are incentives that can keep corporations honest as well. It might not be suitable for a Web3 community purist. That's not what we're trying to solve for.
Right. No, that's fair enough. And I think it's key to have a conversation like this because we have to start somewhere, right? And it has to, and then it evolves from there. But yeah, you're right. I mean, someone may rip apart what you said in terms of
totally,
just
and we welcome that.
Yeah, and I think it's good to challenge. But because the whole point of Web3 is also to sort of go away from what. Well, yeah, you're right. We can go down a rabbit hole on that front, but still. I wanted to actually, because we're talking about security scalability, just quick question. What are your thoughts on the blockchain trilemma? Do you think it's even valid to talk about it still in terms of how Vitalik has set it up? Or is that something that you don't think about?
Well, we think about it, but those are constraints. It's like a Rubik's Cube that's only relevant to a token-based blockchain.
Okay.
Right? Remove the token and you have significant white space. So let's talk through them. security. We talked through that every signed transaction is cryptographic secure. So it is highly secure. We don't have a consensus mechanism there that it's a deterministic mathematical based blockchain. That's where you got your security. Scalability. Our blockchain does not have a block limit. It is flexible. We are currently running it at roughly 300 million gas per block. Ethereum, for context, is at like 30 million gas per block. And they've talked about, Vitalik's talked about raising the block height and all those types of things, right? The reason you don't do that is because it crushes your token price, right? Because you've just made a whole bunch of more product, right? So it's less scarce. So we know that's why that doesn't happen. We don't have that economic constraint. We are only working with technical constraints. And so when you remove the block height constraint, and we've done tests up to 1 billion gas, the only other constraint is hardware and compute. And the metrics I just shared with you on 300 million gas, 2-second block time, running at 100 times the capacity of Ethereum, like 10x the capacity of Polygon, is with a similar AWS node instance of like that costs $1,000 a year. The exact same. So if you scale that hardware up, really the only limitations are like distance and the speed of light. Like that's what you're working with, right? And so that's on the scalability side. So there's no constraint there. And then the third, decentralization. Big topic, obviously. Philosophical. There's been a lot of battles on this one. Yeah. I would say from a high level perspective, putting my Web3 hat on, right? The Web3 community, as much as they have, I think going back years ago, they would really hammer on decentralization being so paramount. I think the whole community has shifted dramatically, and people would fight me on this. And there's some people who haven't budged. So for those of you that have stayed there, congrats. But the industry has moved to, we need something that we can actually use, right? That's usable, and you now have L2s that are perfectly centralized with one sequencer, with the hope and dream in the future that's going to decentralize, right? And we're now going to layer 3s, and we're adding all of this centralization because we have this architectural problem that we've been discussing for the last 45 minutes to an hour. And when you actually look at it, so we've kind of given up a little bit, not fully, but just it's important to us, but we need to have this tech work. And when we look at stability now, going to the way that we think, because we believe in decentralization, that you need to have, we are going to have, 10 validators. We want to decentralize that as quickly as possible. We'll be more decentralized than lots of players in the current Web3 space.
Arguably, yeah, absolutely.
With the hope to be more decentralized in the future, just like everyone wants to be. Right. But I would pose to the group to think about what is the decentralization of Ethereum? And I would use the term the Nakamoto coefficient, which is how many entities does it take to stop the network? And this is well publicized that is pretty close to 2, if not 2, when you take the amount of stake between Lido and Coinbase, right? And that's one centralized point. And then a second one would be like, oh, by the way, 70% of ETH validators are on Amazon. Okay, that's another significant centralization point. I don't do that to downtrodden. It sounds like I'm shooting bullets over the bow. I'm not. I'm just trying to highlight that we need to look at it in a full context, and any point of centralization in the network is its centralization point, regardless if it has 10,000 nodes or not. Fair enough. And I think I agree with you. The decentralization conversation has shifted. It has definitely shifted. So I think I'm with you on that one. Okay, so we've covered sort of the original trilemma, musketeers, security, scalability, decentralization, which, of course, it's important to everyone. Then it just has to be, have to actually make it work, right? Just shifting a little, the conversation a little bit, I think I've exhausted you on that front. Who are you looking for
to use stability?
So we have been, we're a team of 13. We are a startup. We are self-funded.
You are self-funded, which is
yes.
fairly unique and more rare in the space than not.
We don't have a token, right?
Right.
And so there's a whole different model there. So we had to will this into existence. So the customers that we're focusing on, as I mentioned, are enterprises. We've been going in a lot of different verticals up until recently to find product market fit. At the end of the day, you need to find the beachhead where you're going to get adoption, customers paying, and we are a company that's going to generate revenue, this crazy word, revenue. When you don't have a token, there is no Web3 businesses that make revenue, right? So I'm shooting a shot over the bow, but we have tokens and we will often turn that into a revenue number by selling tokens, but I'm talking real recurring revenue, right? For sustainability, right? There's a sustainability element there. So I digress. The areas, gaming, we had traction.
Okay, so in terms of the verticals.
Verticals, gaming, brand loyalty points, payments, and then supply chain and logistics. And that's the one where it's really, we found as of late, the most significant real world traction, and supply chain is probably the biggest market and vertical by order of magnitude than all of them. And one that both public and private blockchains have failed miserably converting. And we've all, since the beginning of time, it's this is going to work in supply chain. We've all heard that, right? And every big four accounting firm is saying it's coming, and it hasn't happened.
Yeah.
So that's where, just as the last couple of weeks, stability has been selected by the Singapore's Technology and Innovation Authority, which is called the IMDA.
Oh, wow. Well, that's a big milestone.
It's transformational.
It's congratulations.
Yes, thank you. So we have a government that is the technology and innovation and digital transformation leader of the world by order of magnitude, has identified stability as a technology that can help them transition the port of Singapore, which is the second largest and probably one of the most strategic ports on Earth, to help them transition from the traditional paper-based bill of ladings. This is a piece of paper that they call a transfer document that is like a bearer bond, going to finance speak for a second, where if you hold this piece of paper, you own the cargo, right? That's how the world works today.
Wow.
It's shocking. So the goal is to convert these to electronic bill of ladings. There are a lot of players that all need to integrate with these bill of ladings. There's shippers, there's whoever's selling the goods, there's banks, there's a lot of people that are involved. And a public blockchain, a public database where you can transfer ownership and you can also check ownership on this public database is required to make that work. Now, to get all of those parties to align is nearly impossible, right? And a government entity in Singapore that can bring all of the stakeholders together and say, here is your framework to do it. And oh, by the way, if you're going to pull your ship into the port of Singapore, by 2030, if you don't have your electronic bill of lading, turn around.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So you have a forced adoption, and the supply chain touches everything, right? This is why it's you need to do this really well. You need to help these companies, and we're going to do a 3-part trial because when you're accepted from a technical perspective, now you have to do trials before you're just granted, right? And there's only 3 networks that are approved to do this. Ethereum, Polygon, and this little rinky-dink blockchain called Stability, right? So I say that in jest, but there's a real opportunity here, and the opportunity is that enterprises can actually seamlessly adopt it, because the wallet infrastructure for, let's say, a big multinational like Temasek or Maersk, they can say yes, but what about the warehouse that's going to now need to have a MetaMask and Ethereum on their balance sheet, the dock worker, the bank, all of these. And this is where that whole system, that framework is stuck, and stability unlocks that, where it can seamlessly be adopted among all of these enterprises.
That's pretty amazing. Well, because when you just mentioned Maersk, I actually lived in Denmark for a few years, and I just was sort of closer to the industry, and there was just constant. There was just the challenges were just almost unsolvable, and all these different components that you're talking about. It is pretty groundbreaking what you just outlined. I have to actually say, so the forced adoption, the 2030 deadline, this is actually official.
Yeah, it's stated. And you have there's other companies that are doing electronic bill of ladings, and they're using Ethereum, like private companies that are doing it. This is obviously a government that is putting, and they've got a separate entity that is focused on bringing blockchain into various verticals of the society. Like Singapore is an incredible country. Like people often refer to it as Singapore Inc., as in it runs its country like a country. It's like we wish more countries would run themselves like.
Yeah.
And it's right now, every university degree in Singapore is on the Ethereum blockchain today.
Really?
With a technology called OpenCert.
Really?
Right? Like these guys are so far ahead.
It's very avant-garde, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so they're constantly looking ways to create efficiencies, and where, public distributed ledger technology can benefit. And so I think there's a really big opportunity for the rest of the world, and why we're so focused on this case study, because then we can show other governments, other multinationals how to do it.
Absolutely.
And just the bill of lading for shipping, if you transitioned all of these bill of ladings just for shippers, it would save $8 billion a year.
Really?
And that's their own, association, shipping association, saying these numbers, right? So it's really well known. We're pushing paper, folks. Like, right? Yeah, you've got counterfeits. You've got all of the things that happen with paper-based stuff.
Sure. Well, so that's a successful partnership. Sounds like a marriage made in heaven.
Yeah, it's just one of the areas we're still supporting. Gaming companies that are our clients, right? Like we can offer zero gas transactions for gaming, right? These are highly transaction-based games. So there's a lot of different use cases. You and I enjoy this part of my job, is talking about all of the opportunities, right? There's so much white space. And I guess that's what I'm inviting people in to have a conversation, is for a minute, put down the guard on some of the mental models that are really, really firm. I had them. I went through this my journey. We've all on our team gone through this journey. We had to put down our mental models, try new mental models, get to a new white space and say what's possible, right? And it's really fun. And I can't wait for, in the future, as other builders start building and companies start building, of what's going to be possible, because we haven't even scratched the surface. We're 13 people scratching around. We're paddling in, white space all by ourselves. And I can't wait for more people to join us. Yeah,
you mentioned 13. And are you scattered geographically, or are you sort of based anywhere more in the US?
Yeah, we're global. We're fully distributed. We have
decentralized,
yes. We have folks in Singapore, Toronto, Spain, and the US. That
sounds fabulous. So Stability's on public testnet since November. What is in store for stability in the short term?
So with this news in Singapore, we are pushing our mainnet launch forward likely. No specific date that I can share with you right now, but it will be definitely this year. And, probably Q1, Q2, I'm guessing, is kind of rough target. And it's really making sure that we support our customers and having a successful outcome and really making sure that works for them. Like, there's going to be a large component of our business that's going to be customer service, to ensure that they have they're able to integrate it. They're able to see the benefits that we've all wanted to see, right? Because if we can do this really well for a small subset of enterprises, we're going to learn, right? We're going to make mistakes, but we're going to get better. This could really be something. And I'm excited about the opportunity to try to solve a big problem. Whether we are successful or not, it's exciting to work on a project like this that is really trying to advance our industry and not being stuck just focused on, an economic situation.
Right. And just in terms of, and just going back to your mission, I mean, you are utility focused, and it does lead to, you are actually solving problems, right? You're actually solving actual use cases, and the speculation part is out of the picture. I just wanted to quickly, you did talk about in terms of your revenue model, but how do you monetize? How does Stability monetize? What is your revenue model?
Yeah, so we will really be starting with licenses, like to license the software, and there'll be like customer service agreements, like SLAs, master service agreements. These are, when you think of like the value creation that can happen with that type of model, even an open source model, that your audience might be familiar with Red Hat, which is one of the largest server kind of operating systems that's open source. It was bought by IBM for $34 billion, right? And that's an open source platform, and they offer amazing service, customer service. And if you want anything kind of customized, there's the fee that goes associated with that. That is potentially in conjunction with our licensings, that's going to be how we make money. It's not going to be, it's going to be software as a service and customer service. Absolutely.
It does totally make sense. It's just, the conversation is for me, it's so different from what I'm used to, that it's actually inspiring, to be honest, hearing about all the different opportunities and just what you mentioned, and solving the supply chain and the shipping. I mean, these are global challenges, and just what we've seen also. Well, with COVID, all hell broke loose, and not even with COVID. I mean, that's a whole nother rabbit hole, but still, there are a lot of issues to be solved.
Yes,
and I'm glad that you guys are tackling it in that way. I always ask my guests, this is sort of the typical question of, so you have a team of 13, you're self-funded. What would you say has been your biggest challenge throughout this stability journey?
You're basically,
have you had any challenges?
Yeah, no. Oh,
are
my
you challenge
goodness.
free?
No, this is this. I'm
not the day to day.
I'm pausing because there's like, where to begin?
Yeah.
Right. We are selling a new religion, like, in a sense, right? I say it in kind of in jest, but it's so different and in a different path that it's an education process. Like, we're all trying to educate people on traditional Web3. That's what this podcast is doing as well, right?
Exactly.
And now we have the challenge of not only, blockchain being equal to cryptocurrency, right? And educating enterprises, but also educating our our friends in Web3 on what we're trying to do, right? And so we've been very much on an island, and that is okay because we're cool with that. It feels lonely, but when you're not doing what everyone else is doing, you're probably in a new direction, a new path, new white space where innovation can truly happen, right? And it's not been easy, but we've had to self-reflect and understand that and use that as energy to push forward, I would say. And so that's been the biggest challenge, I would say.
Is there no one that's doing what you're doing that you know of? I mean, the sort of the gasless concept has taken traction. Tokenless, not so much yet.
Yeah, I'm not aware of another tokenless public blockchain. I hope there is. There is a lot of room
Right.
for other folks to build, and the jury's out of whether it's going to be one chain or specialized chains. Can one chain stability do all of supply chain plus payments,
right,
plus like,
right,
maybe not, right? And we're comfortable with that. Our goal is wanting the whole industry to be successful and getting blockchain, privacy, security, self-sovereignty, the next iteration of the internet, which is what we're all trying to do.
Right. And
there's a lot that's not going to happen from 13 people. Let's be honest.
No, but you're definitely a good starting point and you're definitely gaining traction. So thanks for sharing your vision and your unique model. And as we sort of wrap this up, I think that I've exhausted you enough in terms of explaining the ins and outs. But Klay, are there any key takeaways to add that I may have maybe missed or haven't asked that you would like to share?
Not really. Other than I would ask our community, the Web3 community, just to keep an open mind. I know a lot of what I've said today can be like antithetical or jarring, and I would say just ponder, mull, digest, think it through somewhat. And at the end of the day, like stability, we're here trying to find like ground truth. We've been asking anyone to kill our idea to save us time, right? We're not married to anything. We're just trying to go in this direction. And so if anyone wants to participate, is interested in this mission, reach out. But yeah, I think that's all I would add.
Perfect. Well, what is the best way to follow your work or perhaps contact for particular business needs or participation? Yeah,
I'm not super active on Twitter. I'm not a super Twitter user, but I'm there. I'm on LinkedIn. We have our website. Happy to put any of that in the show notes. If people want to reach out, happy to have a conversation.
Perfect. Yeah, we'll definitely make sure that we include all of that information in our show notes. Well, Klay, thanks so much for talking with me today. As I mentioned before, I've talked with many founders and builders in the blockchain world, and it's amazing how on one hand the tech and solutions are evolving so quickly, yet the adoption process is yet to ignite. So I think it's conversations like these that push us forward, and education is important, even if it's just a conversation. The typical response of most guests is that we're still early, right? But like you mentioned, I think it's important to reflect and ponder, and we're in this together, trying to make it better and more workable and the way it should be. So all the best to you and your team. May stability pave its path and mission to true utility, as I would say. Actually, I almost feel like saying the Star Wars-esque mantra, "Let stability be with you."
Well, we may have to use that. So I might have to steal that.
I don't know why. That just sort of shot through my head. But thanks so much for taking us down this path. I didn't want to interject too much because it's actually been a big learning journey for me in trying to piecing it all together and how you guys are set up. So thanks so much for that and painting the picture.
Nina, thank you for having me. Thanks for all the work that you guys do on the show. I love the show. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Klay. Thanks again to our guests, and thank you everyone for listening. Thanks also to the Bariam Music team for providing their music. You can check them out on bariammusic.com. The episode supporting information is on our website, blockchainrecorded.com. Our podcast is available on Google, Apple, and Amazon Podcasts, as well as on YouTube, Spotify, and Radio Public. You can follow us on Twitter at Recorded Podcast and YouTube, where we are super grateful for your support. Stay tuned for our next episode.